Hello and welcome to the video. This is a quick video about the glues that I use in the hobby. Now I had this fantastic question from one of my Patreons, Sarah, asking me for this video. So Sarah, this one is for you. However, I think it's probably something that most builders could make a video like this and probably have a slightly different list. I have lots of glues that I use on a regular basis, but it's been kind of whittled down over the last several years into really only 4 that I use on a regular basis. Before that, I've tried pretty much everything. I found stuff that I really loved. People have got me up with kind of other glues and suggested them, and I've tried them out. And having tried everything, bearing in mind that the majority of the builds that I do here are typically going to be foam-based models or 3D printed parts and things like that, I thought it would be useful to kind of go through the ones that I use regularly here. Now, the regular stuff that I tend to use here is things like good old super glue. This is the one that I'm currently loving. This is one I think I got from Amazon, industrial grade super glue. They're available in lots of different viscosities. This is medium viscosity, so it isn't like a water and it isn't like a thick snot. This is kind of in between. It means that you can put it on the places that you need. This is very handy. I do have the kicker for it as well. However, it goes off so quickly and you only have to hold the part together for 4 or 5 seconds. Then, to be fair, I don't use the kicker very often. Second thing that I use a lot here is good old hot glue. Now, hot glue is one of those things that I got into when I first started watching things like Flight Test many years ago, and I've used it ever since. There are lots of different colours of hot glue sticks. They're available in different sizes. All hot glue sticks are not created equal though. These are the ones that I currently like. These are not only great glue sticks that work incredibly well, but they also act like a proper glue rather than just being like a hot snot that sets up and kind of grabs hold of the two things that you've smeared it all over. I'm also a fan of things like 2-part epoxy, things like this Gorilla Glue epoxy here. Love Gorilla Glue. I've always been a fan of it. This is the 5-minute stuff, so it sets up relatively quickly. However, you don't want to have this on a model that you're going to be flying within, a couple of hours putting it on. Ideally, it needs overnight to go off completely. They do have to mix the 2 parts together. There's the chemical reaction that goes on when you mix the 2 sides of an epoxy actually form it to go off. So you do have to pre-mix it and make sure that you mix it very thoroughly. I used to use a lot of epoxy. Epoxy was one of those glues that I used a lot in my engineering days, but it gets less used now. Probably my favourite glue of all time at the moment is good old UHU Por. I have another tube ready to go when I get to the end of this one. This is fantastic. It is incredibly versatile. Again, like epoxy, it takes a while to set up completely, but you can use it as something like a contact adhesive where you can put it on both sides of the joint, let it kind of almost dry and then push the 2 parts together, or you can just use it like regular glue and stick it on the 2 parts and push them together and let that then squidge in all the different places. There are other glues that I have tried, things like Gorilla Clear Glue. This is one that I got in when I was doing things with things like the guys up in Scotland that made those planes. I am not as fond of this. I used to really like it, but I found that it can peel off with moisture a little bit too easily on some of the foams that I've been playing with here. So I've kind of swapped all the times I would have used this for something like UHU Por. And then other ones that I've liked in the past are things like this. This is the E6000. This is a fantastic industrial strength adhesive. There are lots of different versions. Some of them are better than others for foam. Again, the reason that this is in the packet is, to be honest, I've kind of found that UHU Por will do the job in all the places that I need it to, where I would have gone for E6000. And then you have other things like your standard UHUs and also things like all-purpose clear glues. But the fact that these are on the packages are just because, to be honest, the standard stuff that I use, which is your UHU Por or your CA or hot glue, kind of does 99% of the things that I need. Now, there's a number of things that you need to think about to determine which glue you're going to use in which situation. Things like how quickly you need the repair to be done. So, if you want it super quick, hot glue is going to be your friend. Things like the versatility of the repair, whether or not you just want to press the pieces together and they're going to be stuck, or whether you need to be able to slide the pieces around. Maybe it's a piece that has to be pushed into a piece of foam where you don't want the glue to set up until you have seated it and you're happy with its position. Also thinking about the materials to be glued, whether or not they're porous or they are a 3D printed part that has maybe a very shiny finish. Cleanliness of the areas to repair. Always make sure that the things you're sticking back together are nice and clean. They're free from grit and dirt. But also with things like foam, it's also worthwhile potentially making sure that any of the mold release is off from the surface. That can stop stuff like the Gorilla Glue that I've been looking at getting a good bond. Also think about the ability to bridge gaps. Things like CA are very bad at that. Some of the others are better. Epoxy isn't bad, but things like hot glue is great. If you manage to put your model back together and find you have a little hole left because there's a piece of foam blowing around the field now that used to be part of your plane, you can kind of fill that very quickly with a little blab of hot glue. The amount of vibration and impact the joint will see is also really important. As we'll look at in a minute, I'm not a fan of using CA in lots of places in the hobby because when it sets up incredibly hard and brittle. And because of that brittleness, if you have too much vibration in the model, it potentially will separate or snap the joint. The appearance of the repair is important too. I tend to try and use clear glues wherever I can. That means that no matter what I'm gluing back together, hopefully if I get the two pieces close enough and wipe away the excess before it all sets up, the repair will be pretty seamless too. And it also depends on what you have to have. It's important that you keep a selection of glues handy on your bench for when you need them so that you're not trying to make a glue do something that it isn't really good at. So let's talk about our friend Foam Safe CA. Now, Foam Safe CA is something that's been around for a while. Again, I rarely use this in the hobby. If I use it, it's maybe if something has snapped or a piece is broken off. And what I'll do is I'll wrap that piece in cotton thread and then soak that cotton thread with super glue to create kind of a composite material. That's really the only places that I use this for now. Things like super glue, even to put 3D printed parts together, isn't great in the hobby because any kind of shock will typically delaminate the part and break it apart. The great things about CA is that it does dry very quickly, so it will give you very fast repairs. It's just seconds, and if you use a foam safe kicker, then you know what, it's going to be even faster than that. It's great on non-porous surfaces. It can get in lots of different viscosities I've already talked about. This is medium viscosity. We can get it so it's very thick, snotty glue, which allows you to precisely place it, or you can get it where it's very thin glue, which is good if you want it to wick into a joint. And it does allow a small amount of movement before the joint kind of sets up. So you can, if you need to push a piece into a hole, put a little bit of glue around the edge of it, push it home. As long as you do that quickly, you should get the part in there before the glue sets up. Only a couple of things. Beware of that brittleness. There are versions now that also have like microscopic little rubber balls in there to help with that brittleness. That's a big issue with CA. And also some CA glues will upset the foam. So if you're not sure about it and it doesn't say it's foam safe on the bottle, test it on the model before you use it. Next one to talk about then is hot glue. This is one that still gets used regularly here. I have a couple of different guns. This one plugs into a 3 or 4S battery, and this one is one that's my friend bought actually for my birthday this year. One has clear glue sticks in, the other has dark glue sticks depending on what I am putting together. It's great for foam models. It's a very, very quick way to repair stuff. And it's great in places where you also need that little bit of time to position pieces, because you can kind of put a blob of hot glue on and then kind of push the piece into it, and it acts like a big gluey mess that'll kind of keep everything together. Good things about hot glue, it kind of cools in a predictable way. So once it's up to temperature, you have probably, 30 seconds of working time before it sets up. It's great on all surfaces if they are clean, whether they're porous or not. And it's fab for simple glue joints. And it's, as I also said, it's kind of good for filling little holes and adding a little bit of strength as well. Comes in lots of different colors. I tend to just use the clear ones here and also the black if it's inside a model or it's part of a black 3D print, and it can be used at the field easily too. You can have these kind of battery powered units here that allow you to have a couple of sticks along with this in the bag at the field, and if you accidentally break the tip of the wing off, you can run a bead of hot glue, have the wing back on and have it flying in a couple of minutes. And it's also nice that it's not too hard to remove the excess. Once it's started to go off and become a little snotty, you can just kind of roll the excess off with your fingertip. Less good things about hot glue. Not all hot glue sticks are created equal. Some of the cheap and cheerful ones that you get from places from eBay that comes in pack of 100 from China for a couple of quid are pretty ropey. They're not very good. They won't provide good adhesion, whereas I kind of use these ones here. They're a little bit more expensive, but when they set up, they actually act like a proper glue, not just a snotty mess that's solidified between the two things you want to put together. Be aware though that I have had issues where if there is moisture about, it can get behind something like a hot glue joint and potentially peel it off. And it's not great if you need to get the glue into a place that the hot glue gun can't get to easily. The nozzle of these hot glue guns only have a certain amount of reach. Next one then is to talk about epoxy. As I mentioned, epoxy was one of the glues that I loved in engineering. It was used pretty much all the time. I use this in places where I want a really, really strong bond. The other nice thing about epoxy is when it sets up, it is incredibly tough and incredibly resilient to things like vibration and impact as well. The nice thing about it is that it doesn't go off in the tube as much because you have the two separate parts and that you have to mix them together thoroughly before you can use it. That does mean that it takes a little bit longer, and you do also have to have kind of a mixing stick and a piece of paper ideally or something to mix it all onto. It's really good for all surfaces if they are clean. Again, it doesn't matter whether they're porous or not. Epoxy is incredibly sticky stuff when it's all put together. And there's only a couple of things to be aware of it, really. It does take a while to set up. Although it says it's 5-minute epoxy, this particular one that I have here, although it will kind of hold the parts together in 5 minutes, I would give it overnight at least in order to set up. So it's not a quick one. Even if it says 5-minute epoxy, I wouldn't fly a model or use a model or drive a car that I'd done a repair in until at least the following day. So be prepared to kind of set up some kind of strap or clamp or tape around the joint to keep it immobile while the epoxy sets up and does its job. Save the best till last, in my humble opinion. UHU Por, this is the stuff that you will see everybody using. Expanded polystyrene glue. It's a particular type of the UHU that just works incredibly well on not only foam models but other things too. It's also great and kind of resists vibration and impact as well, so it won't snap in the same way when it's gone off as something like CA. It's nice because it's safe for foam, works on pretty much anything though, so but with this one tube I'll use it to glue 3D printed parts into position. The nice thing about this is it does have a long working time, so similar to the epoxy, you're probably going to get 5-10 minutes before you have to have your joint put together, but that gives you a lot of time to mess about and to position everything and make sure you've got it in the right place before it really starts to go off. Easy to clean off the excess because it's very liquid. You can kind of brush it away with your fingertip or with a corner of something like a tissue. It provides an almost invisible repair, and I really like it because not only can you use it as a standard glue where you kind of dribble some in the crack in the foam and then close the foam up and wipe the excess off and then just put a bit of tape on it and leave it overnight. You can also, if you're putting two things together, put UHU Por, a thin amount of UHU Por on both sides, let it tack up and then push the two pieces together and they will grab instantly. I would still then leave it overnight to go off, but it's sometimes handier to do that if you want to be able to just position something, push it together and for it to stay in one place. So hopefully, Sarah, that's interesting for you. These are the kind of things that I really like. You'll see the same stuff being used all the time. Personally, I would recommend getting yourself some 5-minute epoxy, some UHU Por, and some medium viscosity CA that's foam safe. And you probably, with a hot glue gun, be covered for 99% of the times you ever need to glue something in the hobby. Thank you for watching the video. If you watch my videos and find them useful, then please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe button. It helps the channel a lot. If you really like what I'm doing here, you can become a Patreon and support the time I spend helping others and get access to lots of exclusive benefits. Link is in the video description. Remember that all the videos on the channel are organized into playlists, so you can easily use those playlists to find all the videos on a subject that you are interested in. Add Painless 360 to your searches on Google and YouTube, and it'll help you find my content for any particular topic. Thanks again for watching, and as always, happy flying.